Roy remembers his mother urging him to live freely, but he cannot enjoy that freedom because heavy responsibilities hold him back. At the Lutetia Empire's border, a hooded figure hovered over the soldiers. They felt only fear and suspected he was the legendary Dark Sage. The Dark Sage raised a hand and cast a single spell that unleashed devastation across the battlefield. After killing most of the enemies, the survivors panicked and retreated because they had no chance against the Dark Sage Eclipse, who told his allies the enemy had fled and there was no need to pursue them. And while everyone praised him, he revealed he had another identity besides being the Dark Sage of the Lutisic Kingdom, then teleported away and immediately changed his appearance to take on that other role. This unsettled the White Sword Saint of the Kingdom of Albios. Cloud checked with the knights and learned they feared another attack after Lutetia was hit recently, so they stayed alert for shadows in the mountains along the border, and Cloud sliced the mountain that blocked their view. After the mountain was cut down, the approaching enemy from the forest cowered in fear because they did not expect the White Sword to call out that Cloud was here, and Cloud thought this must be another trick and that the knights could now guard the borders alone, but this still did not reveal his true face, and he was neither the White Sword Saint nor the Dark Sage. Exhausted from working before dawn as the Sword, the Steward, and the Sage, he returns to his house in the Grand Duchy of Berland, and as soon as he enters his room he reverts to his true face, but the triple life is wearing him down, and his real name is Roy Lever, known in his household as the Fallen Noble for good reason. He keeps his other identities hidden because he can't attend an academy with such prestigious titles, and revealing them would do no good, and he's always sleep-deprived, so he sometimes hopes expulsion from the academy would free up his time. And since he was already late, he took a short rest and later heard a knock and called out that he was awake. Reena Leval, his sister, entered the room with his lunch and was surprised to find him already dressed in uniform a few minutes before his usual lunchtime, so she asked him to fill in for an afternoon class today, which he planned to do, and suggested they have lunch together since she had already made it. Roy felt lucky to have such an accomplished sister, but she told him to work on himself because if he kept slacking, he would stay a fallen noble. Roy was fine being called anything as long as it caused him less stress. Rienne was frustrated because all her brother did at the academy was arrive late every day. Renglas had no friends during practicals and spent his time resting at his desk, and he performed so poorly that everyone began to treat him as the academy's local quota. Roy stayed calm and remembers that Glass Rain Academy was founded by a three-nation alliance of Lucia, Albios, and the Berlin Kingdom to train talent from all three countries with top teachers. And because Berlin had to send someone, they sent Roy, who is not happy being placed among so many energetic students, and his sister tried to cheer him up by saying he is more capable than this, which bothers him because she is not wrong, but he can just tell Reena that. Reena told him something was up, and he figured she'd still worry when she saw him lost in thought. He could always talk to her. She moved closer to reassure him. She reassured her brother that he was not alone and that she would always support him. Roy felt awkward about her worrying, so he said it was fine and told her to head out. He couldn't resist her cuteness. Deciding to tell a certain person about last night, he went to their room in his household and was surprised by what he saw when he entered. Roy found his father being chummy with the maid, and Linus Level, head of the Level family, asked why such a powerful figure was here. Roy told him the Gallia Empire had invaded Lucia last night and he came to report it, and Linus, who had arranged the three-nation alliance 12 years ago and was remembered as the Grey Fox strategist, was also one of the few who knew Roy's true identity, while Lannis told Roy that if he quickly repelled the attackers, there was no need to report it because raids from the Gallia Empire were common. The Gallia Empire once controlled nearly half the continent. Despite that, their current emperor was aggressively expanding their territory. Roy thinks their invasions have become excessive lately after hearing about it, and Linus asked if Roy is worried about the incident 5 years ago when many of their children were kidnapped. When I mentioned Reena was among those children, I warned their country could be targeted soon if this continues. Linus remembers the infiltration team was wiped out before Rue arrived, and both know Reena used her power unconsciously. Linus and Roy want to hide Reena's dormant great power, because if others discover it, invasions will escalate and Reena herself is unaware of it, so they cannot let her fall into enemy hands. Rory wants to focus only on defending his nation, but he cannot do that until successors for the Sage and the Sword Saint appear. Roy's drive to protect everyone came from his mother, a hero who died on the battlefield 12 years ago defending her family. Before her last mission, she had told Roy to live his life freely, but Roy is sorry because he can't do that yet, and he coughed up blood while still working extremely well. Becoming the strongest was hard, but he did it to protect Reena and their family with his own power. The next day Roy arrived late to class and the students mocked him as usual, but he took his seat and rested as always, while others said his family must be ashamed to have a failure in a line that included his father, the great man who forged a three-nation alliance. His mother was a secret sword wielder and a hero who risked her life for her family and country. Roy's brother serves the king directly, while his sister Reena placed second in middle school. It became normal to believe that all gray-haired people from Berlin were geniuses, except for one who always slacked off. Students constantly talk about the great sage and the white sword saint, who were incredibly powerful and always defended their countries from invasion. Rory remembers that people give titles to 10 sword demons, with the strongest called the sword saint, and Lutetia has a similar system for mages where the strongest is called the sage. Those two figures were the goals of almost every student, but our boy has no interest in any of it he just wants to get some rest whenever he can. Soon the professor arrived, surprised to see Roy in class, and right after starting homeroom, he announced there would be practical mock battles today and told all students to head to the training grounds. Roy was bummed because he hadn't expected the day to be such a hassle, and when the teacher announced that the top student would get special training privileges, he planned to lose quickly and just slack off. The teacher then introduced Roy to his. Yukina Crawford sat on it, a beautiful girl even Roy knew as the academy's third-ranked student. He might be losing, but the match could still be tough against her. Now she took her stance and greeted Roy. After they exchanged greetings, she made the first move as the sparring began. Roy saw her aim for his sword and kept taking her blows with a frightened look, knowing he could throw the fight, but that would leave a bad taste because Yukina was heir to the original Sword Saint legacy and wanted to become one herself, and being third among the 10 sword demons proves she is a true prodigy. That makes her a promising Sword Saint candidate, but she is far from being one of the world's top 7 swordsmen because she has a clear weakness. Roy wanted a strong successor to take his place so he could retire and relax with Reena, but he also wants Yukina to become strong on her own. Moving in, he tried to point out Yukina's weak spot, and she was startled by how close he got. Ward decided to help by pointing out her weak spots. Yukina appreciated his offer, though she still believes she will win. Roy saw her charging forward with a powerful offense and little defense, which should be enough against other students, but when she faces stronger foes, she needs to learn that defense matters most. Roy struck Yukina's right arm to cause pain and expose a weak spot, then she took a stance, ready to go all out on her next move. Roy saw she was aiming at a fiend to the right, so he figured it was safer to get caught and pretend to barely miss it. To his surprise, Yukina wielded magic eyes, and he knew how troublesome they could be. Magic eyes was a rare skill that showed up only in people with high magic power, and these eyes looked like a top-tier wolf eye, letting her see through an enemy's moves, so Roy was sure she had seen through his fake fall for the fiend, and he could not risk letting her detect his intent to be defeated. Hiding his purpose again was necessary to keep people from finding out he was stronger than Yukina and stirring suspicion and trouble, but he didn't know what to do as Yukina kept launching attacks. She switched to a different style again, and Roy noticed her attack change so forcefully that he let his sword be struck and sent flying. Admit defeat to her impressive skill. After class, Roy goes home to rest, and then remembers that no one noticed an unmotivated student like him when class ended, and now he must give his all and play his other role. Using puppet magic, he left a puppet in the attic to take his place. During his absence, he teleported to the kingdom of Aldios to assume the identity of Cloud, the white sword saint, swapping places with the puppet he had left to stand in for him, and the puppet shared its memories, giving Roy a clear understanding of what happened here while he was gone. His room is a secret hideout only he knows about. Everyone else assumes Sword Saint wanders free, so they never know where to find him. Dressed in his Sword Saint attire, he took his cloud and used illusion magic to alter his appearance slightly. He went to the royal castle of the king of Albuquerque. Cloud was warmly welcomed by everyone in the castle. They respected the world's strongest swordsman, and Cloud smiled as he went to the royal courtroom. He saw the king constantly receiving worrying reports from his informants and about monsters. When everyone noticed Cloud had arrived, they fell silent, and the king asked the sword Saint Cloud what he thought about possible attacks on the court. King Albert is one of those great rulers, and people say only he could forge an alliance with the longtime adversary Lutetia. Consider Cloud Booter. He showed respect for the king and said politics were not his concern, but he could only say one thing. The king believed he could rely on Cloud the Sword Saint against an army of thousands whenever they came. He gave it little thought, ordered the general to withdraw troops from the borders, and refused to discuss it further. The ministers were shocked by the king's complete faith in Cloud the Sword Saint, and he told them to keep the army intact until the right time to launch an invasion. Willing to follow any royal command, Claw had been ordered 2 years earlier to drive back the Empire's invasions and reclaim their lands by force. King Albert said they must gather strength now to avoid wasting resources on unnecessary military buildup. Cloud said the enemy is likely planning to reclaim lands they lost, even though those lands were never truly theirs. Albert knew the king of Gallia was greedy, but he still preferred to avoid him. Facing war, Cloud agreed with the king, but they cannot just sit idle and let them attack. The young emperor of the Gallian Empire was driven by conquest, and killing him was difficult even for Cloud because 5 guards protected him. Each of them has strength that could rival him, so Cloud is patiently letting the king of Gallia slowly move his troops and guards to the front line so he can act when the emperor's guard arrives. He will keep reducing their numbers at the front, so their numbers will eventually decrease. That would be a long, difficult haul, but it was the only strategy they could use. King Albert hoped they would give up soon, and Cloud could see he did not want anyone to get hurt. There's nothing to be done until the current emperor of the Gallia Empire is replaced, and as long as this continues, Roy will have to remain the Sword Saint and the Great Sage until a successor is found. After that, Roy returned home exhausted, and the next day he had to visit the king of the Lutetia Empire as the Great Sage, so he needed to rest as Roy, and with dinner almost ready, he took a short nap before Reena arrived. Later, Roy heard a knock at the door and let the person in, thinking it was Reena, but he was surprised. Yukina Crawford entered his room and called him for slacking off during classes on. Roy asked why she was in his room, and she said she just felt something was off in their mock battle. During the fight, she sensed Roy knew her weaknesses, and it strongly reminded her of when her grandmother, the first Sword Sink, taught her. Roy asked her what there was to compare him to someone that powerful, but Yukina wasn't going to be convinced by his muscle movements and focused gaze Rafasad, and she was already sure there had to be a reason Roy was hiding his true capabilities, so since he knew lying would be futile, he admitted holding back because it's. Imagining it, Roy said he had only noticed an opening because her moves were too aggressive, but she shouted at him to stop acting innocent and pretending he was honest about seeing through her ultimate fiend. Realizing her magic eyes must have seen it, Roy was torn between pretending he hadn't reacted in time and doing something else, when his sister Reena arrived to call him for dinner. She found her brother pinned down by a girl. Yukina casually greeted Reena, and Reena, with a fake smile, asked if Yukina had any business with her brother. Yukina said she needed to talk to him for a moment and asked Reena to give them some privacy. Roy could see how dense Yukina was despite the situation. And Reena pushed Yukina off her brother and told her to leave because she already planned to have dinner with him. Yukina said she trusts her instincts as a swordsman and her own eyes, and since there are hardly any swordsmen stronger than her at the academy, she wants any help she can get to become the sword saint like her grandmother. She felt that made it urgent for her to become stronger, so she asked Roy to help her. He remembers that since becoming the sword saint, no one has tried to take his title, so he admires Yukina's hunger for power. He can't help her because she's not ready to be taught. Wanting her to see what she's missing on her own, his only reply is that she can do what she wants, but he will not teach her. He also asks that she watch and learn on her own and not force him awake in the morning. Yukina accepted his conditions, thanked him, and promised to do as he asked. After she left, Reena was angry because her brother had just given him more annoying tasks. He said it was fine since Yukina at least would not be showing up every day, though he did not understand why she was in such a rush when she was only a first year. Later, Roy became the Great Sage Eclipse and checked the situation there. The knights asked him for a favor, so Eclipse went to the port about it. If it had been a normal beast, Eclipse would have told the soldiers to handle it themselves, but this one was a mythical creature, the Kraken. Eclipse dodged the Kraken's attacks effortlessly, and before its next strike could reach him. About to fend it off with his bare hands, Eclipse pulled back and flew away to avoid touching it, because many people were watching, and he had to keep up his false image as a great sage and avoid hand-to-hand combat since that was the swordsman's style. Raising his hand, he cast a legendary spell he had found in ancient texts, a spell only someone with immense magical power could use. Using that power, he cast the Divine Thunder Spear at the mythical beast. It burned its whole body to a crisp, dealing with the disaster just like that. Everyone recognized the ancient divine magic and had never seen such powerful magic before, and Ward played Eclipse, the great sage, masterfully while hiding his. Smiling, he was happy but knew he still had to find a replacement for this age's position so he could move more freely. He wanted someone as eager as Yukino to become Sword Saint, and was sure that once that happened, they would be ready to take his place in a few years. Afterward, he teleported home and rested. Later, when it was almost time for Reena to wake him, Roy suddenly heard her shouting. Here, when Roy arrived at school, Yukina followed him everywhere, even to the mess, and when he told her not to follow him or wake him every morning, she said it was for observation practice and that she wanted to watch him as much as possible. Because she believed masters acted differently even in everyday things, Roy asked why she couldn't stop following him and staring so much. Her reply was that she was just curious. Yes, Roy can't escape this situation. Her stare kept him from resting, yet Yukina thought he slept like a baby and even took notes on his actions. When Roy asked if she had learned anything, she said she needed more time, and after classes, Roy returned to his room with Yukina following him, appearing out of nowhere and making him uncomfortable when he asked why she wanted to be there, because she wanted to keep an eye on him all the time. Roy tried to explain that he wasn't doing secret training but just lazing around. Yukina sat down to read her book, and Roy, curious about the one she always carried, asked what it was, and she said it was a book by her grandmother about a sword sync's mindset and techniques, her favorite that she follows. Roy asked if the book told her to stay with a man who was always lazing around, and she replied that she just wanted to take on new challenges. She then talked about her grandmother, an extraordinary sword saint whose strength every swordsman and guardian in the Albio's kingdom dreamed of, and Yukina wanted to be just like her. Her goal was to be a grandmother people could trust to save the day, and she would do whatever it takes to become one. Roy told her it was already good enough to rank third among the first years and urged her not to rush but to take time to learn the basics, while Yukina insisted there was no time. Her loud voice startled Roy. Getting up, he noticed she had apparently said it for some reason, and when he asked her about it, she said it had nothing to do with him. Now she would leave for the day. The way she left made Roy. He wondered if she had said something wrong. 3 days later, Roy was once again being followed by Yukina, and he asked how long it would go on. Yukina said that was a mean question. Before she could reply, Roy was approached by a boy who asked if he was Roy Leavell. Roy confirmed and asked the apparently upper-class youth what he wanted, and the self-centered boy introduced himself as Tim Townsend, a 6th-rank soaring demon and the heir of the Townsend territory under Dupetum, which Roy saw as just an average 6th-rank third year. So he asked again why Tim was there, and Tim said he was not after Roy but after Yukina, wanting her to watch her behavior as his friend. Fans support them because they are expected to marry and raise the next sword. Yukina was furious and reminded Tim he had promised her freedom at the academy, but Tim had tried to control her from the start and did not want his fans befriending a fallen noble, so he insisted she behave more sensibly as his future wife. Roy can't understand why the man acted so high and mighty over the only 6th-rank seat, and he can tell the engagement is forced, and Yukina told him it will keep her from touching a sword after graduation, so he thinks Tim Townsend must be a jealous type who plans to keep Yukina caged. Although they were in a hurry, he wanted to remind her that the Sword Saint was the pinnacle for swordsmen, and he had seen many fail for lack of skill. Yukina said people revere sword saints too much, since watching her grandmother showed her even a sword saint started out as a regular person who wasn't the strongest, and they grow strong through daily effort, so the current sword saint must have earned his strength by hard work and will. When it comes to will, she will certainly surpass the sword saint and protect her country as a swordsman. Seeing conviction in her words, Roy decided they should start practicing right away. She was surprised he took the initiative, and he said he would just help her a bit. Both he and his offer meant a lot to Yukina. Yukina happily agreed to the practice, then asked if they could practice again tomorrow, but Roy refused because he had plans with Reena, so she decided to tag along, and while they were talking. Watching them from behind the wall, Tim Townsend burned with jealousy and hatred for the fallen noble, and when his friends told him Roy had a sister, Reena Level, a well-known second seat in middle school, he decided to strike early and target her to get his revenge. Chapter 3. The next day Reena asked Roy why there were other people when it was supposed to be just the two of them, and Yukina asked them not to mind her being there. Reena had been unhappy before but still wondered why Yukina was in her uniform on a day off, and Yukina said she had no casual clothes and wasn't very interested in fashion. From there they started their day off. Reena browsed the interesting books and pulled. Roy took Yukina to show Reena the new release of the series Reena had been waiting for, which included his simplified version of a famous magic spell, and Reena's excitement made Yukina wonder whether it happened every week. But Roy said it was actually once a month, as a small reward for her hard work. And Yukina found Reena's behavior out of character and confusing, while Roy explained that books were special to Reena because she had been frail as a child and could not leave her room. Back then, Reena's world was just a small room and she wanted to see the fall colors. Roy brought leaves from different seasons and drew pictures for her, hoping she would understand, and his care made Reena smile often. He decided he would do anything to keep her smiling, and Reena began reading and learning about the outside world on her own. Since then, Rain has taken up reading and amateur landscape drawing, and Yukina told him he is a really caring brother while formally calling him legal. Roy asked her to drop the formal address, but she made sure he knew that calling him by name would be like how their friends do, and he said he already considers them friends. Yukina told him she never really had friends, so she doesn't know how to treat a friend. Roy remembered she often sat alone and felt he was mocking her, and he assured her he wasn't making fun. He told her plainly that he wanted her to call him by his name. Yukina gathered her courage. Call them out by name, Roy, like a friend would. That made Roy happy. You were friendly too, and called her Yukina, and later Reena asked both of them to carry some books and felt bad about making Yukina do it. But Yukina said she was fine, though she wondered whether Reena would really read so many books, and Reena said she would finish them in a month. So seeing how much Reena loved books, Yukina decided to share a book her grandmother had written. The former sword saint, hoping it would be helpful for Reena as a Yukina had already memorized it and wanted to give it as an apology for intruding on her plans today, so Reena turned to her brother to see if accepting it was okay, and he said to take it since it is rare to read something written directly by a sword saint, so Reena made up her mind and handed everything she had to her brother. She accepted the book respectfully and promised to cherish it, and Roy was pleased to see Yukina trust Reena with something meant only for family. After he returned from paying for other things, he could not find her and asked Yukina where Reena had gone. Yukina said Reena was just checking next door. Then they heard Reena's voice telling someone to let go of her. Roy and Yukina saw a man who turned out to be Tim, holding Reena's hand without her consent. Tim told her to cooperate, saying he had business with her brother. Reena mocked him for preying on someone who was alone. The mockery hurt his pride, so he pushed Reena and called her disrespectful like her brother. Yukina caught Reena and made sure she was okay, and Reena thanked her for the help. Tim then called to both of them, and they listened to what he said. Yukina demanded he apologize to Reena immediately. Tim asked if he really needed to apologize to the fallen noble's sister, which angered Yukina and made her determined to force an apology, and Tim reminded her that the school forbids fights among students, and they could. During the duel, I threw their academy emblem at them, but Tim knew Yukina couldn't do that since it would cause her a lot of trouble, and he pointed out she was not meant to defy him as her fiend. At that moment, an emblem from their academy fell right in front of Tim. Reena felt a little distressed, and the other two were surprised because the person who threw it was a Roy wants to challenge Tim Senpai to a duel in Yukina's place. Later at school, word of the upcoming duel spread like wildfire. Amid the fire, everyone was wondering if Raven stood a chance against Tim, the sixth seat. Yukina told Roy that everyone was making a big deal of it, and crowds from both nations were gathering to watch the duel. Roy figured Tim had called his parents to brag about a win, the sort of thing an overconfident man would do. Later, Roy sat in his room trying to find a way to beat Tim without raising suspicion, so he called his father for help. Linus said he had heard about the duel and was shocked at first because he thought Roy was picking a fight with a high noble just to quit the academy, but there was another reason. Linus had heard about Yukina and praised Roy for winning such a beauty, as one would expect of his son, and though Linus thought Roy acted for Reena, Roy said he targeted Yukina because he figured a high noble losing to a fallen noble would end the engagement. Roy denied that was his main motive and said he was simply annoyed, and after Linus teased him to admit it like a man, Roy raised the main issue that he had called father here. Linus grew serious and asked what the real problem was, and Roy said Yukina has a heavenly wolf eye, so if she sees him fight badly, his cover will be blown. And while Linus suggested Roy could just cut fast enough to avoid being seen, Roy said he could not because everyone would notice something had happened, and the fact that no one saw it would make it more obvious, since very few can slash fast enough to escape even magical eyes. Linus thought it was hopeless, and Roy asked him to act because only the greatest strategist could find a plan, and pressed to help his son. Linus had to try, and he found one possible way. He told Roy he could win the match by using another weapon from a book. He showed it to Roy, who did not look pleased. Linus told him it should be possible with his skills. Roy would have to wait until the signal during the fight. If it went as planned, it could become a profitable venture, and the man behind it now looked forward to the duel more than Roy did. On the day of the duel, Roy went to the arena and saw everyone gathered to watch the match. The referee checked both fighters and explained the rules, saying a fighter thrown out of the ring, found unconscious, or who concedes will lose. Tim confirmed he had no problem with the rules, and Roy said he didn't mind either, but Roy was still unsure. Roy figures that if the profit from the match can buy Reena a ton of books, he can win without overdoing it. Tim warned him to be ready to embarrass himself. Roy just said he was fine with the match rules. Tim unleashed his strongest move right away, the Townsend Kingdom Thunder, a magic sword technique that boosts basic strikes and turns a normal sword into a magic blade. while Roy had deliberately chosen a weaker enchantment on his sword, and Tim charged. Tim attacked and Roy jumped back to dodge it, and Roy knows that a good sword alone will not guarantee Tim a victory. Tim thought he had the edge and tried to catch Roy off guard midair. Roy soon found himself at the edge of the arena and barely saved himself from falling off. Tom pushed harder and asked how long Roy could hold out, but Roy ignored him and returned from the side to the center. Tim pressed the attack and their swords clashed, nearly grazing Roy. Furious that Roy had stayed on defense, Tim demanded Roy attack, while Roy, seeing everything go according to Father's plan, wondered what Father would do next. Now he only needs to follow his father's wishes to see what Gray Fox, the greatest strategist, can do. Meanwhile, Duke Townsend wondered why his son was doing so poorly. The sixth-ranked seat was struggling against a failed noble, and with those skills Tim could not match Yukina, who sat inside with Roy's sister and, from what she saw, was paying for Roy to hang in there, so Tim was losing this battle. Tim mocked Roy for still defending and said he must be really afraid of losing, and Roy shot back that if Tim was so sure he'd win he should end this quickly, otherwise it would look like Tim wanted Roy to step down because he thought Roy might win, and Roy thanked Tim for seeing him that way, but Tim had no intention of doing. Tim began swinging long horizontal slashes, but Roy kept dodging them and Tim told him to surrender. Roy saw Tim's weakness was mental because he was used to things going smoothly, which made his attacks predictable, and Roy only needed him to wait until Father signaled to finish it. Duke Townsend was approached at the same time by Linus lawyer Roy's father and Royce's elder son, Liam Legal, who was the Grand Duchy's assistant foreign minister, and Liam greeted Duke Townsend politely, while Reena was surprised to see her elder brother and asked if he had come to see Duke Townsend. Liam said he had only come to watch the battle and make sure the duel would cause no diplomatic repercussions, and that he wanted his brother Roy to win, which pleased Reena. Linus saw Yukina Crawford standing next to Duke Townsend, and Yukina returned his greeting, and Duke felt he should apologize to Linus and leave on his son's behalf for how his son had treated Linus's son. But Linus said it was fine because the Albios kingdom is all about swords and supports a woman who wants to fight with swords in Berlin in the Grand Duchy. Unlike the rest of the Townsend family, Duke Townsend was offended and spoke harshly about how reckless Linus Legal's son was to think he could rival the Duke's son, who held the sixth seat at the academy, and Linus defended his son, saying he knows how to fight stronger opponents, and that if the Duke's son cannot bring out his best, inviting guests would damage the Duke's reputation, and could even ruin the engagement if the Duke's son lost to a failed noble. While Yukina began to suspect Roy was doing it for her, and as the duelist's fathers argued, Duke Townsend asked Linus if he was that sure of his son's victory. That would be very uncharacteristic for a strategist like him. Linus said the duel was his son's responsibility, so he chose to trust him and was sure his son would not take a fight he could not win. Duke Townsend said he felt the same about his son. Then Linus said Tim had no chance, so he did not have to worry about Roy losing. He was so sure he even bet on Roy to win, and Duke Townsend laughed when he heard it and proudly said his son would claim the victory. Reena and Liam tried to calm their father, but Linus told them not to interrupt. After that, he wagered his gold mine on the bet. Duke Townsend refused to back down and offered 5 carriages of gold bars, but Linus mocked that it was not even enough to be a real wager. This showed how little Duke Townsend believed his son would win. Duke Townsend then raised the stake to 15 carriages and asked the nobles behind him to witness the bets and prevent anyone from taking back their words. Linus confirmed everyone heard it, and for some reason it sent chills through Duke Townsend. That left him with a bad feeling. He still doesn't think a failed noble could even fight back, and now everything depends on the outcome of this battle. Roy pretended to struggle, while Tin was genuinely hurting, because the battle was slowly draining his strength. It made no sense that Roy stayed on his feet while he could barely keep up. Roy said he would win this fight no matter what. Tim agreed and went all out with the Townsend family's signature move. The Thunder Cherry had bladed, and Duke Townsend was sure of his son's victory. Yukina could see that Tim's attack power had surged to astonishing heights after activating the move, and just one hit could send Roy flying out of the ring. Tim declared he would end the duel with a single strike, and Roy readied himself to meet it head-on and finish the match too, and he could not stand the Leval household's pride in having one sword saint in the family, which they now carried around as if it were entirely theirs. He dismissed them as failed nobles protected by a single woman, and now he'll show Roy where they belong. The mockery made Roy feel settled. Roy remembered being a child and asking his mother to show her secret sword technique. She told him it was not time because the technique turns damage into magic and channels it into the sword, and since it is a last resort move, she did not want to teach it yet. Roy then asked what the purpose of the skill was. It was the swordsmanship she used to protect her family, she said, and Roy now understands why she abandoned that technique and didn't teach it to him then, because she didn't want him to pay such a heavy price. It was like sacrificing himself to protect others, and now as a sword saint he knows he can use the sword without repercussions. He activated the secret sword ember. Linus signaled him to win the match now. Roy's eyes filled with determination as he glanced at Yukina and wanted to get back at Tim Townsend for his attitude toward her and for insulting Roy's family. Roy charged in, vowed to make Tim pay for what he did, then crushed Tim's torso with his sword while holding back. Ten was sent flying by Roy's powerful attack, and Roy ordered him to apologize for what he had said about his close ones. Ten landed in the crowd where his father sat, and that decided the match, with Roy winning. Linus praised Roy for winning this match because it means their family will be safe for now, and Roy's back looked strong and reliable. Yukina saw that and said she would be the one to defeat him in the future, and Roy J. He always accepted her challenge whenever she was up for it. It made you eager to be happy when he returned from the arena. Reena met him with worry in her eyes. Roy boasted that he had just defeated the 6th seat and asked Reena if she liked it. At that moment, she hugged him and said she was worried about him. She'd been terrified he'd disappear like their mother, and now she's relieved he won and is safe, and Roy reassured her he'd be safe and thanked her for worrying. Later, Liam asked Father about the secret sword ember because he had never known Mother left anything like that behind. Linus told him he wasn't suited for it, since Roy's specialty was swords while Lyon's was strategy. Everyone has their strengths and should focus on them. Now he figures he should head back, and after Father left, Liam mentioned that Father can be. At times, Liam seems like everything he says or does is calculated. Roy understands, and Liam apologizes for bringing it up, saying he is glad Roy won not just as his brother, but also as someone from the Grand Duchy. Liam explains that Roy defeating a noble from the Albios kingdom carries some weight, and he'll do his best to transform the image of their house and to change their father's inner image for the sake of the family. Roy was eager to support his brother, and Liam thanked him. After that, Liam urged Roy to take his classes more seriously from now on. In the middle of it, someone urgently reported to Liam that the Imperial army of the Gallia Empire was invading Al Dio's border with 100,000 troops. Lyon worried because their force there was only 10,000 and had to leave immediately to deal with it, and Roy couldn't rest either since Al Dio needed the Sword Saint now, though he also felt oddly relieved after tiring of holding back so much. Roy transformed into a cloud and reached the border, where the Sword Saint relieved his boredom by defeating this army. The Kingdom of Albios is a land of swords, the Kingdom of Lutetia a realm of magic, and both train talented individuals into warriors equal to 1,000 men, while the Gallia Empire relies on sheer numbers. Heavy magical armor and cutting-edge war gear that make them invincible. Cloud suddenly appeared in the middle of the army and beheaded dozens with a single slash, showing they were not invincible to him, and when his sword appeared the whole army fell into chaos because they had all assumed they could take down one man together. The Sword Saint charged straight at their captain and made it clear he wasn't there to play. The rest of the army fired magic guns and tried to overwhelm him with raw firepower, but Cloud picked them off one by one. He went to their base and met Imperial Army General Egon, who wanted a duel with White Sword Saint Cloud, so Saint Cloud demanded a one-strike duel because he had little time. The general was buying time so others could escape. Cloud asked why he would risk his life, and Egon said it was His Majesty's command. Then Egon and Cloud tightened their grips on their swords as the atmosphere shifted. Egon struck first, Cloud dodged swiftly and stepped back to launch a counter. Before Egon could react, Cloud had already driven his blade through Cloudsword's armor, making clear Egon was no match for him, but it wasn't over because Egon had planned to sacrifice himself from the start. He came prepared with explosives strapped to his body to take the Sword Saint down with him. Even after the trigger was pulled, nothing happened because Cloud wasn't fooled by such a cheap trick and had already disarmed the explosives. It was over for Egon, even in his last breath. He prayed for the Gallia Empire's glory as Cloud ended the war, standing in the rain and wondering how long it would last. Later, Roy went home and Renev asked if he had been disappointed in her lately, so Roy asked what had prompted the sudden question. She asked if he missed the days when beautiful women would wake him, and Roy said he'd rather sleep than be woken by a pretty face, so she believed him and they went to school together. When Roy arrived at school, he saw Yukina, who said it had been a long time since they'd seen each other, and Roy remembered he'd been away to fight an army of 100,000 by himself, and even though he could handle them all without trouble, he was getting flustered over a single classmate. They headed to class together, but Yukina asked him to stay for practice because she wanted him to see something. Curious, Roy went to watch the video. Look, Yukina showed him her new cursed Sword Ice Blossom technique. Roy felt the chill of her cold technique and tried to act macho as if he was fine, and when practice was about to start, she told him not to hold back, and he asked her to go easy on him. Yukina made the first move, and this time her movements were more precise and refined, as if she'd been practicing a lot lately. He braced himself for her usual attack, but this time she stood still, and he wondered what was going on with her unusual combat style. He asked if she was taking it easy, and she left it to his imagination. Roy decided to raise the stakes and test it, catching Yukina off guard and causing him to lose his grip on his sword. Roy said he was impressed by her improvements, which made her glad, and he could see she'd been focusing more on defense lately. She wanted to keep working on both of them at once. Later, while they were sitting, Roy praised her for keeping up with practice regularly. Then he asked her what was happening at home. Yukina felt uneasy that his duel with Tim might change her life and asked Roy if he was worried. Roy admitted he was, and Yukina said the engagement was broken off, so she was free to graduate from the academy and pursue her dream of becoming a sword saint, and she was glad to follow her grandmother's footsteps and aim for greatness. All of it was thanks to Roy, who made it happen. After he accepted a senior's challenge to help her, she saw him differently, respected his help, and vowed never to give up. Roy felt that would give too much credit. She asked him to keep cheering her on from now on. Roy nodded to her request, and she asked how the flame technique he used back then worked. He hesitated at the mention, and when she pressed him, he said it was a secret technique he could not share. People called him a cheapskate for keeping such a good thing to himself. Roy was glad to see she's at least enjoying herself now, while he's out here living his normal life. People have started watching him because they fear Roy level could disrupt their plans, so they need to keep everything under control for their majesty. Sutton Roy was about to meet another beauty at Sunnier, a prodigy in fire magic and an infamous troublemaker who had been dying to meet him since she heard about his duel and planned to ask him out. A short time earlier, Reena practiced controlling her magic power. She maintained an unwavering disbelief in magic. Her performance left everyone in the training hall amazed. They looked up to her as the second-ranked student in their middle school. At school, the teachers expected a bright future for her. Her smiles captured the hearts of many, while in the shadows a spy from the Gallia Empire watched her. Just as she was about to jot down Rana's activity in her journal, Roy caught her off guard. Roy clamped her mouth shut to stop any sound. She tried to use magic to escape, but he stopped it without being seen. He ordered the spy to stay quiet because he did not want anyone to notice, then dealt with the spy. Roy cast a powerful magic circle to deal with the other spies nearby, and when they saw him use magic, they could only think of a great sage's magic circle. Sadly, they won't survive to tell the story. After cleaning up, Roy checked their belongings and found information on students, discovering they had sneaked into the academy posing as merchants. If more of these spies are out there, it could cause trouble, because it means the Empire's rats were good at blending in with the people. Roy used puppet magic to create his own people and sent them out to gather information across different areas at once. Roy remembers that 5 years ago Reena crushed the Empire's army, proving she could be a serious problem for them. The Empire sought Reno's power because she proved the Star Spirit's apostles, once mentioned only in rare texts, were real. These apostles had star veins that channeled magic from across the continent, giving them nearly limitless power. They turned out to be Roy and his sister, who were found by two people investigating the sudden disappearance of the Empire's army. Roy stopped them because it would put pressure on his sister Reena, so he chose to take both roles himself. The two were surprised to hear this because no one could play Sword Saint and Great Sage at the same time. Then the woman came up with an interesting idea. She had the idea and decided to give it a try. She started training Roy in both magic and sword skills, and he shed a lot of blood and sweat during the whole training. It turned out that even those two apostles of the Star Spirits had been underestimated. Roy trained and became both a sword sink and a great sage at once, and he gained an endless supply of magic power, while Reena does not realize how precious she is, so she cannot be handed over to the Empire like this. Roy had come to his mansion of Eclipse Identity in the Lutetia Empire for work. He wanted to stay at the academy a little longer, but time was short, so he had to come. He had tried to convince his father to let him quit the academy, but Linus wanted him to stay and learn more, and Roy thought things would be easier if he did not have to spend so much time there. At that moment, the Valuer of Wind Magic, the 7th of 12 heavenly mages, greeted him and was one of the few who knew Roy's identity. Roy asked why they had called him out here so quickly. Vela said he wasn't free either. Valera, the top information broker in the Three Kingdoms, specialized in slipping into empires when needed. Rory knew Vela was the only man busier than him on the entire continent, and he now began on the main reason he had called Roy here. He told Roy the Empire was planning an unprecedented large-scale operation, and Roy asked when it would take place, but Viller could only guess for now, and the unit involved would be the King's Imperial Guard, which explains the mission's scale. Roy realized the Emperor of Gallia must be desperate to succeed now. Valor explained that even the recent invasions of 100,000 soldiers were only to gather intel on the enemy, which Roy found ridiculous, but Valor said it showed they were committed to going all out, and as the Great Sage eclipse, Roy's mission remained unchanged, to repel them. Valor was reassured to hear that, but he made it clear the Gallia Empire was not foolish, and that no number of troops Eclipse mobilized could break through them, and he added the operation had a hidden agenda. The message is written in an encryption code he found here, but he has not yet deciphered it, and only higher-ups seem to understand those letters. It could be cautioned because they cannot afford to fail, but Valor thinks otherwise, and Eclipse asked if it might be a diversion, which Valor agreed to, impressed by his sharpness. Eclipse decided to be ready for whatever came, and Valor, as the great sage, told him to stay prepared for anything, to leave intel gathering to him and handle combat out there, and before he leaves. Valor asked Eclipse if he had considered an apprentice. Eclipse wasn't interested, but Valor thought he would make a good teacher. Eclipse said he was busy with his own affairs, and Valor asked if that was why Eclipse had sent puppets to blend in with the people. Valor accepted anything as long as Eclipse protected Lutetia Kingdom. For the apprenticeship, Valor had someone in mind, and asked Eclipse to tell him if Eclipse changed his mind. Eclipse chose to let Valor introduce that potential apprentice. After closing the door, he returned to the academy and lay on his back on the grounds to enjoy the beautiful day, Yukina leaving him to relax and finally respect his hobbies, and their talk with Valor making it clear he was about to get busier. Outside, Roy wanted a few more peaceful minutes to enjoy the fresh air and the bright, clear sky. A huge water bubble appeared out of nowhere and rushed toward Roy, who spun to shield the drawing he was working on from the splash and wondered what had just happened. A beautiful woman rose from the water, admitted she had messed up again, and apologized to him. Introduce yourself as Annette's sonnier for the magical arts. Suddenly, a beautiful girl named Annette asked him out on a date. Her uniform only added to her beauty. Roy turned and offered his handkerchief to dry her, and she had expected someone famous like him to be that kind. He then asked what she had meant by her earlier words. She suddenly asked him to train with her. Watching her practice outside reminded Roy that magic was banned inside the academy, and he blamed that ban on the journal because she had blown up part of the academy when she lost control of her magic. Annette noticed the drawing in his hand, called it unique, and Roy grew flustered because he knows he's bad at drawing. She decided to help him a little by fixing his drawing. She explained the parts she had improved in his drawing. Roy understood it better now. Having practiced it a lot as a kid, she was good at this. For now, she held the leaf. She walked away, planning to approach him later in the cafeteria. She was selling croquettes, and Annette Sari didn't normally use the cafeteria because he brought his lunch from home. As Roy was about to leave for a quiet meal, Annette asked him to buy the last 2 croquettes so she could finish her work. Our guy bought them to help her. After thanking him for his help, she asked for one of the croquettes as they walked. Roy said he had dinner afterward and planned to save it for then. She started making a fuss, insisting everyone should share. Roy agreed because she helped him withdraw yesterday, so she got a free, tasty croquette and enjoyed it wholeheartedly. Roy then asked why she was selling croquettes. She said she had to because her family was struggling with poverty. A son in your family is famed as a master of fire magic in the Lutetia Empire, but the family's decline began 12 years ago when her grandfather died and her parents passed away a few years later, and she cannot just stay sad because she has 3 younger brothers and 2 sisters to feed, so as the 23rd head of her family, she must work hard. At one low point, she even considered selling her body. During that time, a man who seemed shady noticed her talent and, with government support, got her into the academy. After that, she was relieved and happy that her family could survive. Roy thought the shady-looking man might be Viller, and Annette the apprentice he had mentioned, but Annette said the support only covered her schooling, so she still needed to save money. And when Roy asked if being a mage would be enough to support her, she replied that her family was known for fire magic, and she wanted to restore their name by becoming a fire mage and a great sage. She said she had once seen the current great sage use magic, and everyone who watched was mesmerized. She wanted her fire magic to mesmerize people the same way, and it would make her happy if it inspired even one child. Her inability to control her magic has caused a lot of trouble for the academy. This is why magic is banned inside the academy. Right now, she can only produce small, uncontrolled flames, and even if she practices in secret, she can't catch up with the other students. In her current state, she can't become a mage like this. Roy noticed a trace of sadness on her face. The next day, his sister woke him at lunchtime, had already set out water and some food, and then left for school while Roy remembered dreaming about the day everything began. Protecting his fragile sister drove him to become a sword saint and a sage, and Annette feels the same duty to protect her siblings as their eldest sister. Research showed Annette's grandfather died in a battle arranged by Roy's father 12 years ago, which means your family's downfall was caused by the legal family, and now that Roy knows this, he must act before regret sets in. Now is not the time to be a sword saint or a great sage. It's time to be Roy level and settle things for good. Later at school, he spotted the net wherever water had splashed on the ground, and she noticed it too. She asked him if he was trying to distract her. Roy asked how she noticed him, and she replied that she was just sensitive to her surroundings. After the discovery, Roy offered her a towel to dry off. Annette worries he must see her as foolish for using water magic and trying to protect herself from it, but she only wants to overcome her fear of failure, and Roy can tell what she means. No wonder she was crying in her place. Roy told her that growth needs struggle, but she thought of it in many ways. Roy wanted her to stay strong because she had strong magic and talent but was inexperienced, so he showed her a place and told her to stop sulking and follow him for now. Guiding her by the hand, he thought about how much she was enduring to succeed as a mage and how her own power could overwhelm her, and he doubted the academy could make a place where she could use her magic comfortably, so being told to wait felt almost like a death sentence for Annette given her situation. Roy led her to a mysterious place, and she wondered where they were. Everything around them glowed with magic, and Roy asked her to cast a spell at the nearby tree. She worried it might burn, but Roy assured her it would be fine and that he'd handle anything that happened. Casting a massive fireball at him, she feared something bad would happen. Roy told her to look ahead. She saw the fireball magic being absorbed by the trees. He explained this was a starving cluster point where magic flows, so the trees are blessed and incredibly resilient. They rarely burn, and if they do, the flames are extinguished instantly. Ancient heroes once trained here, and it will be a perfect training ground for her. She wondered how he had found the place. Roy had just stumbled onto it while looking for a good view, and more importantly, she could cast magic here as much as she wanted and practice to her heart's content. He told her that after she finished practicing, he wanted her to teach him to paint again as payment, since free things were risky. She thanked him for helping her so much. He had one more thing to tell her. His father had caused Anne's grandfather's death. Annette said calmly that she already knew that her grandfather could have chosen not to go on the mission assigned to him, but he went of his own free will, so blaming anyone would be disrespectful to him, and Roy understood what she meant. She was glad to see that he was worried about her. Now she's fine because of him. She would certainly become one of the world's top 10 mages and repay Royce's favor many times over. Roy knew she wasn't lying, and in the end, everything went just as Valor had planned. Valor was torturing a man named Abraham to force him to reveal what a secret encryption code meant, but Abraham stayed silent and said he'd rather be killed, so Valor urged him to think of his wife and just show how to read the code. That led to his death at the hands of Value. Valor wondered where to go next when he heard Abraham's wife call for him. He wanted to sneak away too. He was about to go out and take care of her to avoid being discovered, but he suddenly remembered Eclipse's warning not to harm uninvolved civilians. Valor had barely left her and rushed out like the wind because he did not want the Great Sage as an enemy. Now they had to rely on the decryption team for the code, and after a few days he got the hooded man to decode the letter. The man asked where Valor had gotten the code, and Valor said he had connections. The man warned it was top-level encryption that only worked if you could use it. Valor pressed him for details, and the man said he could not find the exact date, but the code described plans to deploy a force of 400,000 soldiers for simultaneous attacks on the kingdoms of Albios and Lutetia. But that was not everything, too. Valor was shocked to learn they planned to sacrifice 400,000 people to seize the Grand Duchy, the Tri-Country Alliance's cornerstone, and since Roy lives there, he realized they had used the Kraken's chaos to slip their men into the duchy, and could not believe the Gallia Empire could even control monsters. They were already caught in the Empire's trap. He needed to tell the Great Sage immediately while Roy rested under a tree. Later at school, Yukina told Roy the Sword and Sorcery Division had a rivalry he could understand, since Albiots and Lutetia had once been enemies, and their alliance did not win everyone's support, and she said there was a rumor he was close to a sorcery student and had shown that girl the training grounds, which surprised Roy because she had heard it and now wanted to visit the training ground. On top of that, she knows the training ground is called a cluster point of star veins. After getting Annette to spill the beans over tea and snacks, she discovered the place was rare and barely mentioned in historical records. It raises the question of how Roy learned about the place, and he thought she must have researched it in the library so he could find his way out, and excused himself from learning about it in a rare book at his home. Yukina accepted his offer and asked him to spar today for practice, but Roy had other plans. She wouldn't let him refuse and tugged him to show her some training grounds while saying he couldn't spar with her, and Roy couldn't say no when she was like that. They were practicing on the grounds behind the building when Annette arrived, calling to them in a rush because a rare phantom beast had escaped from the academy. A bounty was offered for whoever found it. Yukina was impressed by the reward, but Roy thought it was a hassle and just wished Annette good luck finding it. Annette stopped. She told them she wanted that reward more. Money, Roy saw it coming, and they were now discussing how to lure that beast to them instead of having to search the academy, and Yukina knew exactly how to do it. She knew the beast's favorite food, brought a lot of it, and sat in the cafeteria waiting for the beast to appear. Roy asks why Annette is eating their bait, and she says it's fine because they need to look natural. Soon, black smoke passed through their legs and the phantom beast appeared, trying to steal its favorite from the movie. The fruit dropped. Roy tried to catch it, but the beast. They managed to slip away, and the food on the table ended up spilling onto Annette's and Yukina's uniforms, so Yukina decided they should change clothes now. Roy agreed to meet them later and went after the beast. Knowing it was starving, he figured it must be eating nearby. A few minutes later, following its trail, he found himself heading into a room where it had gone. At the spot where Keynote and Annette were changing, Roy was caught off guard. Annette shouted at him to stop taking free peeks at her. Roy said the beast was nearby, and all Annette could hear was a bounty, so she began looking around for the beast. She wanted to follow it, but Yukina told her to put on some clothes first. While they were busy, another student found the beast, and she lost her chance at the reward money. After Roy escaped from here, he decided to go home and sent his puppet to take his place here. Later, he assumed the form of the great sage Eclipse and went to meet Valor to find out why he had been called out. To his surprise, Valor was wounded and said he had been discovered on a mission. Eclipse asked about the injuries, since Valor rarely got hurt, and Valor replied that he had tried to force his way through the Gallia Empire's defenses to crack the code. It was shocking to learn the Gallia Empire planned to send 400,000 troops to Albios and Lutixia, but their real target was the Grand Duchy. When Roy asked why, he said the Empire aimed at the Grand Duchy, the weakest of the three empires and the Alliance's center, intending to break the alliance. Baylor wanted to help Eclipse, but the Gallia Empire's division was far too massive for him to handle. Eclipse wondered if the king of Lutixio would let him take it on alone. The kingdom of Albios might not rely only on sword saints and plans to send its other top knights to the battle. Eclipse said he'd take the whole army and the sword saint would defend the Grand Duchy, and Roy thought it might work because handling large forces is his specialty, but he doubted the king would approve since it could leave them exposed, so Roy kept it from the king and planned to act alone. Valor was shaken because what they were discussing was a national crisis. Eclipse said that was all the more reason to act now, because consulting the king would take too long, and he wanted Valor to go to the kingdom of Albios and share the plan. Valor asked if Eclipse was sure about facing 400,000 alone, and Eclipse replied that this was what being a great sage was about. Trusting Eclipse with the claim, he went to report the plan to the king and left the rest to Eclipse. Eclipse moved quickly to begin scheming to handle the situation. Roy returned to his room at the academy to think it over, since if their main target is the Grand Duchy, the academy would be attacked first, and Valor would warn the Grand Duchy on the way, so others should inform Roy soon. Just then his sister arrived with urgent news that their city was about to be attacked, and Roy asked her about the situation at the academy. She told me the students were in a complete uproar, split between those who want to flee and those ready to fight. Roy knows the Gallia Empire meant to provoke this conflict, so he should head out to take action. Reena said she will return to defend the academy, and Roy will be back in a few days. The rest of the world is still in the same position. Later, the academy announced a plan to form a barricade, but the third-year students were absent, and Roy doesn't think their presence would make any difference. Roy was packing his bag to get ready and told Reena they must inform father. Their father said it would be faster for them to deliver the message themselves than to wait for the writer from the capital. Reena warned that if both of them went home now, it would look like the legal family had fled. Roy did not care what others thought, but Reena refused to leave and wanted to stay to show the legal family always put the country first, and Roy had not expected her to oppose him like that. She said she couldn't follow him this time for the sake of their family, and Roy worried because even though Reena was capable and an asset in battle, he didn't want her to stay in such a dangerous place and wondered if that made him selfish. He can't stand the thought of her being in danger, so he may not have respected her wishes out of worry, since Reena is more precious to Roy than anything else, and he wants her to be happy, and if anything ever happened to her. Roy lost all reason and threw everything aside to protect her. Reena pulled him out of his thoughts. She asked him to trust her because she will speak up for herself, protect the legal family, and take full responsibility for her decisions. She excused herself and left. Yukina, who had heard everything from outside, teased that Roy's little sister was going through a rebellious phase. Roy felt strange, and before he knew it, she had stepped out of his arms, while Yukina said he was just being a doting brother. Roy asked if she would stay in his well, and she nodded that she must stay to honor the three-nation pact and protect her homeland. Roy finds that admirable, but he says that since they are just students, they should see their choice as between meaningless death and fleeing, so he thinks running away is a valid option. You might agree that could be true, and many students have made that decision. Running from a stronger opponent would wound her pride as someone aiming to be a sword saint, so she will not do it. Roy could see her resolve, and she promised to protect Reena so he could leave her with Yukina. Preferring that both escape, he would bring father here without delay to lead everyone. He asked her to keep fighting and not surrender. She confidently boasted she would represent her kingdom and defend this place to the end. We noticed something the sword was saying. She smiled and said she'd be a future sword saint after all, and Roy figures that if she's that determined he won't stop her, though he'd appreciate it if she didn't overdo it. As he was about to leave, Yukina asked Roy whether he would also come back to you. Roy vowed to protect everyone and everything Yukina wants to protect. He will definitely come back. Yukina was pleased by the reply and would be counting on his return. Later, Roy teleported to the battlefront. On the field where the army of 400,000 was, he can't afford to hold back this time. The Gallia Empire's army was invading everywhere. They destroyed even small villages in their path and attacked Egan civilians who could not fight back. Eclipse watched them kill people as he hurried to their location, and reaching the 400,000-strong force would be difficult for him. Now he can't afford to waste time here because the army was just a distraction. Eclipse unleashed a space void magic attack, naturalizing as many as possible with precision. A few hours earlier, he had talked it out with his father, and after hearing the situation, Linus was certain the Gallian Empire was going all out, so he asked if Reena was still at the academy, and he agreed. Saying if both family members left the academy, it would have sparked unwanted rumors. Then Linus pointed on the map that the academy was the capital's last bastion, and a battle would be hard to stop once it began. So Roy hoped it would stay safe, and Linus asked if he had come to care for the academy that much. Roy said it's common to get attached to places you live in for a long time. Linus asked Roy if he had ever wondered why Linus kept him at the academy. Linus replied that killing is the same in war or peace, and that killing makes you a murderer. And 12 years ago, he learned the hard way when war forced them to fight, and their sanity kept them from becoming beasts, and now Roy has almost finished casting his sword. He cast the spell while remembering his father's words that it was good Roy had a reason to fight. Roy said he fought for his family, but Linus called a loan too trivial, and Roy's real reason should be to protect people from all three nations. We wanted Roy to see students from other countries and learn they are not strangers, but just people. The carefree days Roy had were something to protect for everyone, not just himself, and as the strong one he had to guard them with his life. Now Roy was about to bring the war to an end as Eclipse, the great dark sage, and his determination to protect others kept him from becoming a murderous monster. Lannis told Roy never to forget that a mechanism without purpose breaks easily, and that life at the academy will steady his mind in chaos and show him what truly needs protecting, so he should not protect things because he is forced to, but because he chose to. Roy forged a massive divine blade from metal. Release it on the entire army of the Gallia Empire. Nobody can believe a monster like this exists. Meanwhile, Roy wiped them out and proceeded to handle the rest. Soldiers began to fear him and fell back. Rory understands what father meant. Even after cutting down all those Imperial soldiers, it barely stirred him, and the thought of enemies marching toward the academy makes him restless. After wiping out the remaining foes here, Rory used teleportation to head to the next destination so he could get to the academy faster. Transforming into Sword Sync Cloud, he ran on foot toward the Albios Kingdom battlefield. Teleportation was reserved for great sages and eyes were everywhere, so after dealing with the device, he kept moving on foot to avoid being discovered. He figured the infiltration team probably didn't know about their defeat yet. He had to reach the academy fast and deal with them. That was only possible because the king valued the trinational alliance and knew a sword's power comes from its wielder, which helped him greatly. Roy ran to the academy at full speed. At the academy, Yukina stood beside Reena, and they saw only a few students left to fight back. Reena was relieved Yukina had stayed. She said she's here for her own price and resolve, but it's still comforting to have her here. Yukina scans the area with her magic eyes, senses something is wrong, and jumps down while warning Reena it will get chilly. Yukina cast her magic sword, Ice Blossom Flash, around the area. Her freezing slash exposed the invisible monster, just as she expected, and Reena and Yukina were surprised to find the Tarantizio here, which she remembered reading about in books as a creature that mimics snakes and hides in its own smoke. Yukina rushed in to stop it, but was cut off by an Imperial soldier on the monster's back. She told Annette to sound the alarms immediately, and Annette did so. Others could not understand why the Imperial army was working with monsters. Yukina saw something break the barrier and moved toward the academy from the far side. Realizing the Imperial army had surrounded them and brought long-range magical weapons to fire from a distance, she ordered the panicking students to calm down and focus on stopping the attackers. March, if they break through here they'll head for the capital, so only those here can hold them off and protect the nation. Yukina's words inspired courage in all the students, and she moved forward to fight on the front lines. Yukina planned to face them head-on to stop them from breaking the barrier, since everything would be lost if they got inside. When the Imperial army saw Yukina charging, they opened fire and her ice slash froze the shots, killing 2 knights easily. Yukina declared that the Glass Rain Academy students should not be underestimated just because they were students. Soldiers took aim at her one by one while she read their movements with her magic eyes, and as she applied pressure, the Imperial soldiers facing her chose to retreat. At first Yukino felt a little relieved, but alarms sounded again, and she saw 3 more Tarantizio monsters approaching the academy from another direction, which troubled her because stopping one of them was already hard. The students fought them desperately, but that would not be enough. Yukina remembered the enemy targeted every entrance to the academy, and if the bombardments continued, the defensive magic barrier would not hold for long, so she now wondered what to do. A large fireball struck the soldiers' unit, hit the target, and caused heavy damage to the enemy. Annette cast the spell and told Yukina to get inside the academy immediately. Annette wanted to stop the bombardments with her magic and prove she was no longer a burden. She had already managed to control her powers. With her powers now, she no longer has to hold back like before. Annette's flames forced the Imperial army soldier back, and she vowed to make the Sonnegar family name known in history once more. Imperial soldiers launched a close-range sneak attack at Annette, and Yukina stepped in to handle the close combat, quickly ordering the others to stop them from breaking through, which proved a tough fight for the students, but tides returned immediately. Reena entered the battle using her bind magic, but she missed a soldier who was aiming directly at Annette. At the last moment, the soldier was killed by an explosive magic attack that drew everyone's attention and showed who had cast it at the. Royce's father, Winest Level, turned out to be the attacker. He apologized to Reena for being late, and he declared that now he had arrived, they would give the knights of those Imperial armies a hard time. Linus scanned the battlefield and began planning how to handle the attackers. He ordered the armory unit to take their positions and fire magic bullets at the enemy, and Reena noticed the Imperial army rifles and wondered how her father had obtained them. Linus said they should use whatever they can, even seizing the Imperial army's weapons and using them without restraint for their country's sake, his plan slightly lifting the students' morale, while Yukina said it was a relief to have the greatest strategist in the 3 kingdoms with them, and Linus added that other lords would act soon, so they must buy time until reinforcements arrive, which will be enough to win. She hesitated because the students kept taking heavy losses, and the enemy used beasts to make the situation harder. Linus watched the students fight and felt sorry about it. He called out all the young warriors and said this was not a personal fight, but an opportunity to combine swords and magic to amplify their power. Sword students asked the sorcerers to back them up. That small change produced a big result against the knights. The students were starting to gain the upper hand on the battlefield. The Imperial squad leader watched from a distance. He had not expected a group of students to cause so much trouble, and a knight told him the academy was currently commanded by a baron. Knowing Linus is the top strategist in the 3 kingdoms explains the shift in momentum. The leader ordered the knights to bring his magic armor. He chose to go to the front lines himself. Meanwhile, a Gallia Empire Special Forces unit arrived and offered help, but the squad leader refused and said he would handle it himself. The person decided to see if the leader would keep his word. Linus recognized the enemy squad leader, the Southern Front hero Bockstein, and Backstein said they would wipe out anyone in his way, so they should clear the path themselves. Bockstein activated his magic sword technique, Explosive Fire Sword, wiped out a couple of students at once, and broke a hole through the. Entering the academy, he was met by Linus, and they exchanged curt greetings before Backstein launched a direct attack. I was blocked by Yukina Crawford. Amazed by the student's speed, Backstein also noticed her magic eyes could be dangerous and told Yukina to step away because his main target was the man behind her, but Yukina appreciated the concern and said retreat was not even an option here. Yukina launched a cold slash with her ice sword, and Backstein countered with his explosive sword, and she kept striking the explosions with ice until it created a huge. Using the smoke, she closed in on the box stains because her magic eyes let her see clearly, and Backstein somehow blocked her attacks so that during the confrontation he noticed her. Backstein spots her weakness. She can't use the magic sword and her eyes at the same time, and knowing she is only an inexperienced lad, he'll cut her down now to stop her becoming a problem for the Gallia Empire. On the verge of going all out, he was ready to kill both her and Linus Labe. Just then he sensed something and changed his mind. He said goodbye to Yukina. He began to retreat, and when she asked if he was running away, someone backstage said the situation had changed, and if he left now, the academy would become a real bloodbath. At that moment, a huge wolf monster and its pack burst through the walls, and it looked like a massacre was about to happen. The academy was swarmed with more monsters than they could count, and Yukina and Linus had no idea how it happened. Linus said a nearby demon clan must be controlling them, which shocked Yukina because that clan was supposed to be wiped out. So Linus figured the only explanation is the clan was resurrected and the Gallia Empire might have done it, and if a demon clan member is here, stopping them should make the monsters vanish. Yukina took responsibility for holding the monsters in place and asked Linus to go find the demon. Linus went out of his way. After warning her to be careful, he searched for that demon clan member. Monsters were slowing down other students as well. Linus struck the monster, attacking the girl with his dagger, and told her to move to higher ground quickly. He was about to be attacked when Reena protected his father with wind magic, saying she would handle it and asking him to play his part by searching for that demon. Linus grew worried because Reen's vortex protects against humans, not monsters, so he told her to retreat. Reen refused to back down, determined to fight to protect others. The wolf monster broke through her wind vortex and was about to slash her. Reena knew that if she lost now, father and everyone else would be hurt by those monsters. There was no way she could let it happen. Reen released a burst of magic to destroy the monster, even if only for a second. She had no power left afterward. Linus held her in his arms. The monster was about to attack again, but Yukina arrived just in time to protect him or they would be dead. She struggled to hold the wolf back, was hit by a paw, thrown into the wall, and sustained serious injuries. Her left hand could barely move from the pain, so she had to fight with her right arm while the monster was only lightly frozen by her magic after it hit her, and she had no time to relax. 3 more wolf monsters surrounded her in less than a second. Yukina couldn't afford to give up, so she lifted her sword and fought to the bitter end, buying every second she could and doing her best to protect this place as her kingdom's representative. At that moment, she saw something miraculous when the sword saint arrived and with one clean strike severed the wolf monster's heads and saved her just in time. Cloud apologizes to Yukina for arriving a bit late. Now that he's arrived, everything will be fine. The demon controlling the monsters ordered them to target the sword saint and the Yukina who was being carried, and told her to hold onto him tightly, then jumped down the wall keeping a sharp eye on the enemies. He hadn't even set foot on the ground yet. He had already killed several beasts that way. Cloud pushed forward until he found who was pulling the strings behind the monsters, and the demon stayed unfazed even after being exposed. Crawling introduced himself as Crawling of the Demon Tribe and said he had his own reasons for working with the Gallia Empire. Cloud asked what the demon tribe could gain from working with the Empire, but Crawling refused to answer. Crawling made it clear he didn't care about the pathetic humans, which upset Cloud, so before killing him, Cloud asked how he had survived for thousands of years after the demons were wiped out. Crawling claims he vanished in time instead of being killed, and since no one fears him anymore, he will spread fear himself with his sword. Claude led Yukina to a safe spot, while Crow Lime approached with his magnum opus. Fafnir the Dragon Knight. Yukina had not expected such a powerful creature to be controlled by anyone, but Cloud did not care at all, as he attacked Krogla the moment he saw him. He opened him and drove his blade into him. Kralvan cursed after suffering a serious wound. Then the Dragon Knight's attack Cloud struck, and he somehow blocked it with his sword. Cloud wondered when he had last used a sword with both hands, since he was being attacked by both Kralvian and Draggy. Fighting and blocking both of them at once was necessary. Cloud dodged the Dragon Knight's strike and felt the force behind it was something to be wary of. At that moment, Backstain arrived and joined the fight, and Cloud fended off both with a sword in each hand. Claw landed a clean blow on Backstein and told him to end the pointless struggle, but Backstein refused to yield even in his last breath. The Cloud couldn't understand why the Gallia Empire's knights were so determined, and the fight continued with Cloud fighting alone against two powerful warriors. To make matters worse, other Imperial soldiers joined the fray and opened fire on him, which surprised Cloud. Cloud reflexively fought off everything thrown at him, clashed with his opponents, dodged bullets, and kept precise footwork as the Imperial soldiers thought they had a chance, since even Swordscent might not be invincible. Backstein decided that although their main target was the Grand Duchy, the king would value the Sword Saint's head even more, so he ordered the entire army to attack Swordscent Cloud at once and break his unbeaten streak. Cloud didn't waver no matter how many charged him, and he had to admit they had spirit, but it was still pointless. As a parting gift, Cloud decided to show them his demon sword. Cloud unleashed a terrifying strike on the enemy army, and Backstein looked back with a hint of fear but felt no change, so he wondered if the Sword Saint's demon sword had gone dull. Suddenly, everyone felt a quake-like force from a rift in space and time, and within seconds, the Cloud wiped out the entire army with a single strike. Cloud knew how dangerous the swordplay was, so he always avoided using it recklessly. Its power made even his enemies wonder who he really was, since no human could have such strength. When they did not know who the White Sword Saint was, Cloud replied with another question. The guardian of the kingdom of Albios. Meanwhile, Yukina has been watching the entire fight with her magic eyes. Everyone watched every moment. Cloudsworth was done, so he excused himself, saying he had to report to His Majesty. Things happened so fast that the Academy students briefly wondered if they had really won, while Yukino stood stunned by what she had seen. She had no doubt that White Swordscent Cloud's swordplay was exactly the same as Roy's, which meant Roy was the Swordscent. Meanwhile, Roy had to go to the Lutetia kingdom as Eclipse when King Lucian Ven Lutetia summoned him and Valor, and the king scolded Eclipse and Valor because asking the Sword Saint for help seemed like an insult, while Valor glanced at Eclipse, knowing he should have gone to the king first. The Prime Minister arrived with his daughter Ns Alange, told the king it was fine, and announced that Alange, King Lisan's niece and the third-year student council president, would oversee the area from now on because the enemies had likely timed their move for when the third-year students were away, and now that they had returned, everyone in the royal court knew. One of the men said the sixth seat of the sword demons had recently lost to a regular student, which caught Roy's attention, and the Prime Minister said they couldn't ignore it. Valor knew who they were talking about. Vowing to whip the Academy's forces into shape and set up a clear hierarchy so incidents like this do not happen again, Ennis then researched Roy Level, the failed noble who beat the sixth seat, and heard rumors that even Yukina, the third seat, is watching him. For the Academy's sake, she feels responsible for reforming Roy, but doubts she can do it in her current state. A few days after the Empire invaded, he returned to the Academy and students were talking about the heroic deeds of the Great Sage and the Sword Saint. In Albios, the Sword Saint was hailed as a hero, but in Lutetia, the king and ministers scolded him for acting alone. Roy just wanted to pass the torch quickly to a successor. Then Yukina came and asked him for a moment with her. Roy said she rarely invited him for a walk. He noticed her uniform looked different and had a number on it. Yukina explained the student council president had decided ranked students should wear emblems. Roy added he had heard she received a letter of thanks from the king of Albios and Lutetia for her bravery in defending the academy. Yukina did not hesitate to credit the others who helped her. More importantly, Roy called for support immediately, noticed a strange smile on her face, and she said that during the battle she had witnessed the Sword Saint fight for the first time and that seeing it so close was pure luck. Roy told her it was good she had seen her goal with her own eyes. She said it was indeed great, then she came closer and whispered to him to continue guiding her as Roy, the White Sword Saint. Startled, Roy asked what she meant, and Yukina told him not to underestimate her magic eye, which had clearly recognized his secret technique, torchlight. Yukina kept saying she never expected a sword saint to be a wandering man like Roy, and when he called it ridiculous that a failed noble could be a sword saint, she told him to stop denying it, promised not to tell anyone because she understood why he stayed silent, and insisted her eyes never lie, which left Roy without a reply. She now believes training with the sword saint was the best, and Roy finally admitted he had underestimated her. Yukina told him about her match tomorrow and asked him to come watch his disciples' match. That night, Roy finally finished his patrols as the eclipse ended and made sure the Academy's barrier was restored. Roy noticed a different barrier around the arena that seemed to come from someone inside rather than an outside enemy, examined the high-quality magic barrier that only a skilled mage could cast, decided to keep an eye on it, and slipped inside to see who cast it. To his surprise, he found a beautiful girl. A girl and some dancers casually rose to dance under the moonlight, and he felt uneasy thinking she was practicing behind a barrier. But when he looked closer, she seemed to be a noble lady pretending to be in danger, and he worried about what to do. The girl sensed something and asked if someone was there. Roy knew that if anyone found a failed noble crossing the barrier, it would spark more rumors, so he teleported away to avoid being seen by her. Once he arrived at his room, Roy wondered who could have made a barrier so strong that even teachers would struggle to cast it, and he remembered she had blonde hair. At school the next day, Roy sat beside Annette as she calmly munched snacks after receiving a large reward from the academy for stopping the invasion. She sent most of the money home and kept some for expenses, so she could fully throw herself into the ranked battles. Ranked battles are events where lower-ranked seats challenge higher ones to move up, and Roy found them intense even for students ranked in the top 10. Annette told the students Roy could join the Sword 10 if he wanted, since he had even beaten the 6th ranked, but Roy knew joining would leave him exhausted with more work, so he preferred to avoid the hassle. The 7th seat challenged her for her position, and Yukina's match began with a quick exchange of blows as she stayed unfazed, seeming to have it under control, while Roy wondered whether she would turn her sword into a magic ice sword, but also thought that would be a fair handicap. The attacker kept firing ranged wind magic that also made his blade invisible to his target, and Yukina leapt down to land on the strike point from above. The match intensified as she deflected the wind attacks aimed at her in midair. Yukina then took a sharp stance that Roy recognized. As she thrust her blade into the enemy's side, Roy noticed the same motion in what she did after defeating her opponent. She gave Roy a wink to show she had copied his move exactly. The next duel was about to start between the top-ranked mages. On their way back from the arena, the student council president Ennis and Yukina crossed paths with her. Roy asked Annette whether Ennis was really that popular, noting the crowd was cheering loudly for her. Annette said Ennis Alenge was an idol in the Empire of Lutetia and clearly as beautiful as she was talented. Roy checked that NS's opponent held the 8th seat among the mages and was surprised that he was so casual about it, as if beauty did not interest him. Roy made it clear he was only interested in battle tactics, not anything else. She was amazed, and Roy now looked forward to the match. As soon as it began, Ennis's opponent cast fire and water magic at her at the same time, making a flashy opening. The move surprised the audience, but NS easily countered that attack. Magic held her opponent in place. The opponent refused to go down easily, but her efforts were futile against Ennis's overwhelming magic power. Ennis said she can't afford to lose, so she'll have to end the match now. The explosion from Ennis's attack drew everyone's attention. Everyone cheered for her as one of the most promising future Great Sage candidates, known for mastering fire, water, wind, earth, and even lightning. Roy even admits she's truly a complete mage. He can see this must put a lot of pressure on her, and she seems to be managing it well on the surface. Annette's. Amazed by the match, she became an even bigger fan of Annette and her blonde hair and hoped to face and surpass her one day, while Roy, finding the blonde hair familiar, remembered something and decided to check it out later that night. The same girl who danced the night before was N.S. Elling, and this time she seems bold enough to go out in a bunny outfit. Roy has also arrived and is wondering what the girl is doing as she talks to herself, saying she feels relieved not to be bound by titles like one of the top 12 mages, the Prime Minister's daughter, or the King's niece, and she wishes this freedom would last longer while Roy can hear her from where he stands. Anna thought her outfit might be too revealing and worried someone might see her like this since someone had seen her yesterday. Arui wondered whether she could even feel embarrassed, and Roy spoke up saying he felt the same and that she should restrain herself. Taken aback, Hennes was unprepared for his straightforward approach, and Roy told her to learn her lesson and curb her exhibitionism, then asked who was there, but the presence she felt vanished like a lie. Roy left, hoping that once she knew she had been discovered, she would keep a low profile for a while and find a safer way to ease her stress, worrying that if the person who found her was a Gallia Empire spy, they would exploit her, and feeling bad about troubling her, even though he thought it would be for her own good. After practice, she said it wasn't as intense as usual. Roy said that just means she is improving, and she agreed it might be because she had a good mentor. He added the advanced techniques he is teaching won't show results right away. Yukina was eager to hear how her final thrust looked in the match, and Roy admitted it was a great move. He knows she was trying to copy his move and doesn't mind as long as she's having fun. Then Roy meets NS while other students greet them. A sudden gust lifts her skirt and the male students can't help looking. She pretends to be embarrassed, but only he knows she did it on purpose. He felt she needed a serious lesson. He didn't know Yukina had noticed him staring at Ennis like the other boys and was angry, calling him a pervert. Roy doesn't understand why he got involved like that. That night, Roy decided to return to the arena. There was no sign of a barrier nearby, and it did not look like she had left. Worried she might make things worse for herself, he needed to find her quickly. He did not know why he was searching for a beautiful exhibitionist, but on the surface it seemed important for the country. Roy concentrated hard to figure out where she could be now. After searching around, he thought of a forbidden spot near the forest that should be perfect for her to get a thrill. Roy knows Ennis can handle most monsters here, but if things go south, it could. This could spell trouble. He ran quickly, wondering what the girl was thinking while he looked for her. There she was, casually bathing in the open sky pond. Monsters appeared during her bath, but Anus easily defeated them with her magic. To her surprise, one of the monsters grabbed her clothes and started to run away. Roy arrived in time to stop the monster and get her clothes back, and Ennis wondered who he was. He kept his eyes away as he asked her to put her clothes on, but Ennis was so shocked she screamed reflexively. She asked him why he was there. Roy said she should put on some clothes first. Ennis wanted to know first what he planned to do with her. Roy said he would not do anything and pushed her clothes toward her, and then her underwear fell to the ground. When the screen got flustered, Roy pointed out how odd it was that she would swim naked but worry about underwear. He used magic to make a wooden changing box and stepped back to give her privacy. She asked him twice not to peek, and he said if he'd wanted to he would not have gone to all this trouble. After changing, Anis asked who he was, but Roy said they'd have to wait because monsters were coming and they needed to leave. Anis wanted to go alone, but Roy insisted on escorting her, saying he couldn't let a girl walk alone at night, and she told him it was none of his business. Roy suddenly picked her up, told her to be quiet, and leaped into the sky, leaving her a little scared of the height. After a while, Roy took her back to the academy and told her they had arrived. Anis had kept her eyes closed most of the time, so opening them suddenly was too bright, and as he was about to leave because there was no point in staying, she looked up, saw his face, and recognized him as Roy Level, the failed noble. Meeting him like this is the perfect time to ask the questions she has. Roy asked her how she knew his name. More importantly, he wanted her to explain her strange habits before asking him anything. Flustered, Ennis told him to stop calling it a weird habit. Case Roy suggested calling it an exhibitionist hobby, which Ennis found even worse, and Roy then asked why she did those things. Ennis said many expected her to be the next great sage. She doubts she's cut out to be a great sage. Roy had suspected as much because he sensed a lack of mana whenever she cast spells, so he wasn't surprised by her conclusion. She felt she wasn't fit to be a great sage, and he said it was more about suitability, and that if he had to give his opinion, her hunch was right. Anna said she loves the academy, so she must stay excellent, and Roy understood that was why she was pushing herself, and he wanted her to know that if another man had been involved, he would have attacked her in that state. Her response surprised him, saying it might be attractive enough to draw an attack in that situation. Henna said she's used to being in the public eye, especially in Nen's eyes, but that self-awareness unnerved him, and he just wanted a way out of here, and she was amused and asked if he felt embarrassed in front of her. Roy said he could see her because of how she was sitting. She hid herself, and he told her not to do it if it embarrassed her, and she said he should be the one to feel flustered. Roy said he's used to beauties, so he doesn't react much, and Anna added that Roy is a failed noble, but she wants to know who he really is. She had thought he might only be skilled enough to defeat the 6th seat, but after seeing what he did over the past few days, she knows he is much stronger, and Roy told her it's a hassle being the son of a baron, which she might understand, and she is asked if he is helping her because she is the baron's daughter. He replied that it was part of it, but more than that he couldn't ignore her. He decided to help when she was so cornered, she turned to that kind of stress relief. Ennis couldn't believe Roy would do that for her, but he had made clear he would only act within his limits, and warned that repeating her strange habit would cause trouble, so Ennis accepted his offer. She asked him for a favor to keep watching over her, a way to greet. The next day he was named the student council president's assistant without his knowledge or consent, and NS was the one who arranged it, while Roy said he might have agreed to keep an eye on her but never to take this role, and NS told him there was a good reason. Anna wanted the assistant to tag along with the president so Roy could earn bonus points for his academy record. And she also wanted to reform Roy, because they could not let a student who had beaten one of the academy's top swordsmen just laze around. Roy argued he was already safe within the local quota and would not be expelled for slacking, but Anna did not want him to be labeled a failed noble. Roy still did not want anything to do with the student council. And when Ennis heard that she felt sad and thought she had overstepped, Roy felt bad for making her feel down. He agreed to be her assistant until Ennis calmed down her weird habits and stretch. Ennis was glad, and our boy student council days began with even more tiring days ahead. Later he asked if she had any stretch relief hobbies like reading, but her response was something he didn't expect. The effect turned out to be course writing. All the students were there to watch her ride a horse, while Ennis seemed to be showing off through course writing. Roy had no hope for this girl at this point. Back in the student council room, she said she felt refreshed, and Roy told her to get a grip on her life, saying she was only venting stress in a different way for the same purpose, scolding her and asking whether she had any other interests. She replied by running, and Roy could clearly see why she wanted to do it. He didn't want to push so hard but wanted to help her relax. He took her to a bakery for coffee and sweets. The shopkeeper recognized her and offered her the best treats they had. Roy watched her from a distance and thought it might work out. Anise returned later with a sour expression because she couldn't handle black coffee. When Roy asked why she had drunk it, she said she was trying to act mature as the student council president in front of everyone, and the bakery staff had paired the sweets with black coffee so she couldn't change it. Roy worried because Anise tended to overthink both alone and in public, so he decided next time to take her somewhere they would not be seen. At the sacred training ground, Annette practiced fireballs when Roy arrived and called to greet her. She returned the greeting, then noticed the person behind him, was surprised to see NSL and cheered with him. Anise greeted Annette sunnier and said he knew about her problem at the academy, and Annette couldn't believe he knew her, explaining Roy had brought her so she could use her magic freely. Anise asked to join her and Annette agreed, saying it would be stressful not being able to use magic herself. And when Anise asked for stress relief ideas, Annette said she enjoys eating delicious food and its kind. Roy and the gang decided to cook to help Anise relax, so he asked his sister Reena to help, and right after Anise tried, for the first time Reena smelled something burning. Her first attempt was a disaster. On top of that, the kitchen was a mess with unused ingredients everywhere. Reena couldn't believe her brother was looking after Anise, the student council president who had seemed perfect but no longer did. Anise apologized for the mess, and Reena said her brother might be doting, but she would be strict with Anise. We asked Reena to keep it gentle since Anise was here to relax, but she got serious about teaching cooking, and even Roy could not save Anise as she gave strict instructions to both of them one after another until they were exhausted. After they finished cooking, Rory apologized to Anise in the student council room for the trouble, but Anise said she was fine. They'd made a tasty omelet. She was tired and a bit clumsy, so she leaned over and rested her head on his lap, and Rory, not wanting to disturb her, checked if she was comfortable. She said she was just tired and needed to stay like that for a while. She finally remembered they had tried many ways to relax today, and in the end, even though relaxing was hard, she really enjoyed the time. Roy remained worried because it was not a real solution to her problem, but he said it was fine since the academy will soon be on a 3-week break. During that time, Anise was tasked with reinforcing the barrier on Yeka. At the academy, Roy admitted she was remarkable at taking on so many responsibilities and that she cared more for others than for herself. It was no wonder she's always trash, and Roy hopes she'll be fine. He mentioned that Reena wants to have a family trip. Besides the trip, he has no vacation plans and will likely rest at home most of the time. Annie's liked the idea and seems to have something on her mind. A few days later, Linus Level told his children they were going to the Empire of Lutetia, surprising both Roy and Reena. He said the trip was sudden because the Prime Minister had invited him to discuss future matters. He had also heard Roy was getting close to the Prime Minister's daughter. When Roy asked to meet him, Linus felt proud that his son was catching the eye of beautiful women, but Roy couldn't understand why the Prime Minister had suddenly taken an interest in him. He thought it might be in his plan, and on top of that, Rienne had warned both her father and brother in a frightening way not to embarrass them in public. At Ellen's estate in the Lutetia Empire, Annie's greeted Roy, and Linus told Prime Minister Ellen it had been 12 years since they last met. In the war 12 years ago, both served as field strategists, and now Annie's had to leave to take up her duties as one of the top 12 mages, so she asked Reena and Roy to meet again for dinner. After that, Alange stepped forward to meet Linus' son and daughter. Linus introduced Roy and Reena to Alange, and Roy greeted him with proper respect. And Alange noted Reena was certainly stunning, so they might have to deal with annoying pests after her, and he has the same problem with his own daughter. Roy sensed the Prime Minister was secretly angry with him, even though the Prime Minister acted pleased that Roy got along with his daughter. And on the surface, the Prime Minister subtly warned Roy not to get carried away, while Roy felt that Lange disapproved of them. Linus felt relieved they had lent him a villa for their stay. Renews liked the view and the many shops below in the Empire, and when Linus said his son Liam would not be able to relax much in front of the Prime Minister, Roy suddenly sensed something alarming, and Linus saw it on his face. Linus suggested Reena check out the shop she was interested in, which made her happy. When she asked her brother to come along, Roy said he was a bit tired and would rest for a while. Linus took Reena outside, saying they would be back by dinner. Roy was grateful for father's help there. Roy transformed into Eclipse the Great Sage, annoyed that he couldn't even enjoy a leisurely. Magic puppets attacked him, The dolls had firearms and opened fire, and Eclipse drew his divine lightning spear. Intending to wipe out all the magic puppets at once, he remembers that if someone in the Gallia Empire's Imperial army wanted a real invasion, these puppet attacks would not be the whole plan, so he is sure there is more behind them. From a distance, the puppet master watched the eclipse and had to admit the great sage's power was no joke, yet he already had plans to make things more interesting from here on. At dinner, Alange apologized for his daughter's absence because she was caught up with her duties. Linus said he didn't mind, but felt sad he rarely got to spend time with his own daughter, and Alange said his daughter is the Empire's home. His Majesty wants her to become the great sage in the future, since a royal becoming the strongest mage would restore the king's dignity and inspire loyalty, but lately Alange worries it may be causing his daughter pain. He felt pain after asking the great sage Eclipse several times to take her as a disciple, but Eclipse said she was not suited for it. Linus teased Roy that this might be an understatement because she made studying magic her priority. It could not be helped. Alange did not understand what Eclipse was thinking, but if his daughter still aimed for it, he would not stop her in hopes she would not. Hannah arrived and apologized for the delay. Linus welcomed her to dinner. Mentioning she had been tied up with duties, she quickly sat directly opposite Roy and asked the maid to set the table. Roy pointed out her seat to the left of her father, but Hannah found it awkward to talk to Roy from there. After that, Anise unbuttoned her coat because she was exhausted from guarding His Majesty all day in a tight uniform, and her outfit now looked a bit loose, drawing everyone's attention and making her feel awkward. Roy had once called Anise senior. They suggested she change into something more comfortable, and that she didn't have to match their dinner time and could take it easy, but she worried she'd miss the meal if she changed, so Roy kept eating to avoid making her feel pressured to eat with them. Later, Alange followed Roy and asked if he had a moment, then led him into the living room and told T it might be just his imagination, but wanted to know if Anise was causing him any trouble, and Roy replied that it was not exactly trouble, but Anise might be bottling up some stress. Worried, Lange said she had been shy with strangers since childhood and could not relax unless she was with someone familiar, that friends like that are rare today and truly precious, and he hoped Roy could be that kind of friend for NS. He understands he may be at fault for stressing his child, and Roy knows how that can feel as a parent, so he assured him he will do his best to support NF. Alange thanked him and formally asked Roy to watch over his daughter for him. After this discussion, Roy realized he had never seen NS hang out with any particular person, probably because people around her only see her title and not the real her. In reality, the root of NS's stress is that she has no equal friend to share her burdens and expectations. As one of the top 12 mages, she carries an overwhelming workload that wears her down mentally and physically, and Roy knows how exhausting that must be. Roy decided to become Eclipse to give NS a close friend and to support her in his own way. Chapter 14. Firstly, Eclipse reported to Prime Minister Ellen about the magic puppets he had smashed, and he counted on Eclipse for any trouble like this in the future. Then unexpectedly Eclipse brought up the work of 12 mages and said most of their tasks were assigned to young ladies. LNG said the mages in this country focus on research, so the king prefers to give work to family and sends Anise for public appearances, and Eclipse added that even if Anise is easy to ask, she must focus on her studies if she plans to become the great sage. Eclipse was responsible for telling the king in person, but Alange feared it might make things worse. Eclipse asked Alange to tell the king that Anise hadn't improved in magic, and that should be enough to make him understand that the duties of the 12 mages should be shared equally. At the gate he said he should have heard it all too. Eclipse had urgently called Valor out here, even though he wasn't free, telling him they need to do this for the future of young talents. Valor admitted the workload was skewed toward people who were easy to ask, so he agreed it would be a good idea to go back to the future. Eclipse asked both of them to contact the other 12 million. Everyone was put on all the tasks assigned to NS. L Engine v Laura increased their workload and Eclipse counted on them, but L Engine thought it was strange that she suddenly focused on NS as if he planned to take her NS disciple away. Eclipse made it clear he had only just started looking out for the young properly because it's wartime calls for sharper, more destructive skills, and Ennis, a talented mage, wants Alench to understand she is not suited to be a great sage right now. Ellen finally understood what Eclipse meant, and he promised to build a world where Ennis could become the great sage, which required restoring peace to their kingdom, and his message had clearly reached her. Roy returned to Ellen's estate. Ennis asked what he thought of her dress, and he said it was too revealing. She wanted to look nice for the celebration of the great sage's victory over 400,000 Imperial army soldiers. Roy suggested she make it less revealing, so she spent about 30 minutes choosing a dress and finally asked Roy to pick one. Hannah said there would be a festival across the capital tomorrow, and Roy, who already knew about it, casually told her to eat whatever she wanted there. His indifferent reply put her off, so she asked him to show her around. Roy suggested she guide him through the empire of Lutetia, which suited her, and they decided to attend the festival together. After Roy finished picking her dress for tonight's celebration, a beautiful off-shoulder dress in the same jade green as her eyes, he complimented her eyes, and she asked whether he always spoke to girls like that. He did not understand what she meant, and they went on to the victory celebration. They saw Annette had already arrived and greeted her. Then people came to greet her one by one and kept her busy for a while, so Roy guessed she would not be back soon and asked Annette how she came to be here. She said she had come at her guardian's orders to network with others. She has no experience connecting with people and only learned etiquette recently. Roy told her that once Ennis returns, Ennis will introduce her to others, and he could see the nervous look on Annette's face. He knows she must feel the weight of responsibility now, because reviving her fallen house will require many connections and could still fail. At that moment, a man greeted Annette and complimented her. After Annette introduced herself as a sunnier, the man remembered the family was a fallen noble house and refused to waste time greeting her. Annette was visibly hurt, and it was only the start as other nobles began commenting on what a fallen, broken noble was doing here. Roy stepped in to defend her, but Annette stopped him and said it was all right. It's not wrong to say she's unfit to be here. Roy stayed with Annette until Ennis returned. Ennis noticed she looked unwell and asked if she was all right. Roy then asked Ennis to look after Annette, and Ennis took her to show her around. A man came to tell Ennis that King was calling for her, but she did not want to leave Ed alone, so Ed told her to go, said he would be fine, and promised to come back as soon as he could. Roy had a plan, so he went out with his mother's words to live freely in mind, and wanting to keep those words and follow his heart, he transformed into an eclipse. Many believe talented fallen nobles go unnoticed by the public, and others are forced to keep titles against their will. He wanted to redefine what freedom means for everyone on his own,